At a time when the future of nations is shaped not by natural resources, but by the knowledge and skills of their people, the campaign to end learning poverty for all stands out as one of the most urgent and transformative national efforts in Africa today. Education is not just a right, but it is the very foundation upon which strong, resilient, and inclusive societies are built. As defined, learning poverty is the inability of a child to read and understand, and a simple text by age 10 is a growing concern, not only in Nigeria, but across the African continent. Well, in view of the above, the federal government of education, in collaboration with regional and global education partners, officially launched a national campaign aimed at reversing this trend and ensuring every Nigerian child acquires foundational learning, regardless of background, gender, or location. Today, we'll be hearing from education stakeholders on the path forward, the policy framework guiding this campaign, and what it means for the future of education in Nigeria and Africa at large. Thanks for joining us on Nigeria Today. I am your carrier, Clinton. With me in the studio to talk about the campaign to end learning poverty is Honorable Rosemary Ochenemi Oshikoya. I think Rosemary Ochenemi Oshikoya, the former Commissioner for Education, Kogi State. You're welcome to Nigeria Today.
Thank you. Good evening.
I think I got it at the end of the day.
Yes, you got the name right.
Thank you very much. Now, also joining us via Zoom from Katsina is Dr. Philip Hayab. He is an educationist. It's a pleasure to have you on Nigeria Today.
Thank you, Eukaria, and thank you, Nigerians, for joining this program this evening.
Now, Dr. Philip, of course, you had the introduction. We're talking about to end the campaign to end learning poverty. But what actually struck my curiosity is the term learning poverty. What does this really mean, to learn poverty?
Yes, so thank you for that beautiful question. Learning poverty simply means the inability of a learner, that is a child particularly a child enrolled in school, to be able to demonstrate the skills set in the curriculum for the age of which he or she has attained. So learning poverty will show itself in the child's inability to read, in the child's inability to even do a simple calculation. Now, once that happens, we can say for sure that a child suffers from learning poverty. They are unable to learn at the pace at which their mates elsewhere would have attained.
Thank you very much for that opening. It's good to really have that opening, because I was wondering what learning poverty meant, because if you ask me, I will tell you something different. So at what point really are we in this learning curve?
I think the idea of the learning poverty, just to add to what he has said, it's averagely in Africa, it is found that about 89% of children, averagely at the age of 10, could not comprehend. They can't read and understand what they read at the age of 10. So there, it takes you back to what you expect at the learning outcome. At this point, this child should be able to do this, do this, do this. So if you take at the age of 10, which is where this is targeted at, that children at that level, sometimes you'll find that it's rote learning. You memorize a lot of things. They are not able to either read, or if after they read something for you, they do not comprehend what they have read. They do not exhibit, they are not able to exhibit comprehension. So possibly, and maybe you've seen it around you. I did experience that. I remember some years ago, I went to my village, which is off-grid, if you permit me to observe, and then you get in these children. And interestingly, my choice of toys was to go with the usual alphabet, A, B, C, D. And I have these children about that age range. And so they all gathered in this rural community in the village, and I was excited I've brought something from them. And as a way of play, I asked them, string this alphabet together, create 2-letter words, create 3-letter words, the things you take for granted. And I found that they could not do that. I was shocked because some of these children were about 12 years. I'm talking sometime in 2017, 18. And so that's a bit buttress what we are saying. To someone who really do not understand what the learning poverty we are talking about is, when you pick up a child, averagely a child of basic education age, and you see if a child is about 10 years, you're already getting to that point where you're saying you're even leaving primary school towards the progressing there. So if that child is not able to manifest comprehension, or you bring in the age-appropriate book you expect the child to read, and you find that literacy and numeracy are a factor, then that is the kind of things you're talking about.
Okay.
That the campaign, we're talking about campaign to end learning poverty, is saying that we need to address those issues that makes that case what we are seeing now. And if you look at all of Africa, the statistics says about 89% of our children can't do that. They can't read effectively.
So back to you, Dr. Philip. We are talking about ending this. It's a very big problem, really, when you talk about learning poverty, because quite a lot of children are in this category. They really can comprehend, even though they are old enough to. In the other clan, we see quite a lot of persons, you know, even at the 5 years, 6 years, when they have a conversation with you, you'll be amazed at what they know. And so how can we, what are the areas we should focus if we are to end learning poverty?
Yeah, so incidentally, I am not in Abuja, but in Katsina for a teacher training workshop. And we discussed this issue yesterday and even today. Learning poverty is a big problem in sub-Saharan Africa, to be precise, and then it is mostly a situation in public schools. So that the statistics of 87 or 89%, which was done by UNICEF in 2020, and a recent one in 2023, actually focuses on the children who are in public schools, that is schools owned by government. The case is not what happens with children who are in private schools, mission schools. So these children who suffer from learning poverty are children of the underprivileged or people from low-income communities. And then how do we end it? To end learning poverty, one of the first things we have to do is to improve the capacity of the teacher. We're aware that most of the people who end up in the classrooms in Africa or sub-Saharan Africa in this context are not qualified. If at all they have gone to the colleges of education or universities to earn a certificate, they do not have the pedagogical skills that they will transfer maybe what we call a practical knowledge. Rather, as my colleague in the studio said, the teaching and learning is much more about memorization. Memorization is not necessarily learning. So learning has to be that which a child can see, recognize, a child can apply, a child can reason, a child can evaluate. So for us to end learning poverty, we need to take care of who the teacher is. We need to take care of teacher training for improved pedagogical skills. We need to take care of the learning environment. We need to provide reading and teaching and learning resources and reading resources in the schools. That was what we found when we were children in public schools in the 80s. I'm not sure that is the same story now for children who are in public schools, even in the heart of the cities.
Now back to you, Honorable Oshikoy. Of course, he talked about memorization, and he also mentioned the fact that the concentration is on the public schools. But if you look at the private school, we also have similar problems.
Exactly.
We have the same problems. So do we really have what it takes to end learning poverty?
First, I would like to build on what he has said. You know, when we said that the problem lies predominantly with public schools, we sort of exclude the fact that there are different types of private schools. And for most times, if you go to many rural parts of Nigeria, even urban cities like this, it will shock you the kind of learning infrastructure you find. I don't want to go into that. But the point to underscore here is not to say that the predominance of this problem we're having has to do with just public schools alone. Because again, there are different facets to this. He touched on one part. We talked about teacher training. We are quick to always put the blame on the teacher, but I think when we talk the campaign against, the campaign for ending poverty, learning poverty, is a sort of more multifaceted. For instance, it has to do a lot with political will. Speaking from the African context, you said this essence of this campaign has to do with, number one, that we're looking at the financial investments that is necessary for basic education, because we are talking of foundational education here. And so we're talking about the financial investments, which on one side lead to political will, because the infrastructure and the environment around learning, we go into that. Because if you're saying that the problem is the teacher, you would want to look at the circumstances where a child in Nigeria learn. For instance, you would say, why does the teacher resort to rote learning? You tell a child to learn by memorization. So the child goes there because if you look at the apparent basic education classroom you have, assuming the building is there and the structure is there, some of the things you need to reinforce learning at the age of that child, which are some of the things we want to see in private schools, some of what we want to see in big posh schools, some of what you see in foreign schools. You find that most of that is lacking across board. That is to say, that is where you need political will. I saw something very beautiful, I think within the week, about one of the area councils or so, one of the communities in Lagos State, where the Lagos governor was going to commission a primary school that seem to have story buildings. So it's the kind of thing we're talking about, that the learning environment of a child should not just go beyond randomly throwing one classroom somewhere, but then we're looking at that. But beyond that, you agree with me that it takes a community to raise a child. Exactly. So there are other indicators we are looking at, which has to do with community engagement. It has to do with the involvement of parents and other people at that level. And then if you look at the Nigerian, one of the new initiatives Nigeria puts, come to talk about that. When you talk about after the launch of ending poverty of learning last year, you find that Zambia did this nationally, and then you get to find that I think Malawi also joined up. Nigeria has its own response, which is a bit more expansive, and that is the accelerated basic education, coupled up with other things that the Ministry of Education has put in on the table. But when you look at that conversation, you're saying that inclusive education is a lot of what we are also looking at. So I want to say that to every one of us who's engaging this issue, it is not as simple as putting the blame in one. It's as simple as saying, for instance, there's what you call the monitoring of learning assessments, where you want to see is learning really taking place in that of a child. So you're saying that for us to be able to say this is where the problem is, we'll have to look at our own statistics of where it is. But from what my experience in the field has been, if you go to the average local government in Nigeria, they are private schools. And some of them are actually faring worse than some public schools that we do have. So I think if we're going to talk about how to progress, it's a doable thing. And I'm happy now that you know that education is on the concurrent list. Basic education by law, by Nigerians' convention, it's actually the preserve of local government areas. And so when you're talking of this political will, or when you're talking about public schools, we're actually looking at that political will to say, this is not putting the blame on one person. This is saying that the governments at all levels have their involvement. Parents have their involvement. Community structures have their involvement. And it's saying that there has to be a holistic. So is it doable? Yes. Okay.
Now, back to you, Dr. Hayab. Now, is age a factor in all of this? Because we see children 3, 4 years being enrolled in schools. And some parents insist that they should be, you know, enrolled into the primary schools.
So this is a very debatable issue as to whether learning has a lot to do with age. Well, age might be a factor that we consider. One of the basic problems that we should focus our attention on is the ability of the learner. But then beyond that, the capacity of the person who teaches the learner. I totally agree with the former commissioner that the political will is one of the biggest problems. Nevertheless, We are not pushing blame on anyone. I'm a trained teacher myself, and I train teachers. This is what I'm here to do. One of the basic problems of learning poverty anywhere in the world is always linked to the capacity of the teachers, which is also a stem of the political will. If you just look at what happened 2 weeks ago, I think I was on the NTA with Eukarya, and then we were talking about JAM policy. JAM says anybody with 100 can go to a college of education. That is a political will matter. But then if you have 100 for the person to go to the college to become a teacher, what kind of teacher do you think that person is going to become? So yes, this is where the problem is. We have multifaceted problems, but we have to deal with what we can start with, and then we expand. I have a philosophy that I would say that when a teacher is competent, even if learning takes place under the tree, the learner will be able to learn. I am seated here on TV and talking to you. I attended primary school under the tree, primary one, and I could read under the tree. So the issue that the teacher has a problem, and we're not talking about the teacher is at fault, we're talking about whosoever becomes a teacher, is a key factor in solving the issue of learning poverty. So yes, we have issues. I do not really think that age is our biggest problem. Why we are looking at age and saying learner at age 10 is because a learner who is 10 is supposed to be in primary 4. And anybody who is in primary 4 who cannot read and write, it tells you that there is a huge poverty. The person has gone through primary 1, primary 2, primary 3, primary 4, and cannot read. When would they be able to read? So that is why we look at the age of 10, but it's not the age that is the factor. Children who go to very good schools, whether it is public, whether it is private, they are able to read even at the age of 6. So age is not really the major factor. I think the factors, like the speaker in the studio has said, are multifaceted. One of it is our lack of political will to transform education into a viable tool that changes the socio-cultural, the economic, and the progress of its citizens. We are looking at education as just a routine, as just a process. Education is far beyond a routine or a process. It is an empowerment tool. And if we joke with the education of our children, Africa will just wake up tomorrow and they will have even people with capacity to handle its economy, handle almost every facet of life. God forbid, may there be a change and may it happen now.
Honorable Shikoya, in addition to what Dr. Hayaba has said, I've seen, a situation where people get into the teaching profession, not because they want to teach, but because they feel, okay, there's nothing else to do, so I've become a teacher. And you see them teaching without the passion. Like back in the days where we went to school, we see our teachers so interested in making sure they impact the knowledge. So do you think the area of the teachers not being well groomed or well trained or lacking passion is also part of it, a major part of it?
Teachers training on the one side, just this week we're having this conversation with some persons in the education sector. I think particularly it has to do with those in teacher training. And so one of the conversations we're having is how much of investment has been made in the teacher. I think we need to start from there. Because if you're looking at people who are in pre-training, pre-service, look at people in the colleges of education. There's been a lot going on in the social media. So we said, what are the bar you set for them? I think policy again, we said where you say anybody can go, if you can't get admission anywhere else, then get admission into education. I think we have also by that saying that Nigeria doesn't want her best in education, just from what he's saying. That is on the one side. So we're looking at the incentive, the premium that you set. The other one you want to look at again is for people who are in teaching, we said yes, NCE is the minimum criteria. I'm happy that the National Commission for Colleges of Education is doing a lot in looking at the curriculum of teacher development as we speak. Those reviews are going on and a lot of conversation is going there. I also want to applaud the government because a lot of us do not know that the dual system of of certification is coming on, where some of Nigerians, should I say ancient colleges of education, have now become universities of education. A lot of Nigerians do not know that. So that is some of the moves to say we can actually give more incentive to saying that the best of Nigeria should get into education. Like we do say again, it's part of the challenge we see. I'm again trying to say that how much have we actually placed premium? It takes us back to investment in education. Because if you ask the average teacher in the classroom on the streets, you will see when was the last time this person was trained. So we assume that once you leave a college of education and you are in the teaching service forever, we always focus on the issue of your salaries are not paid, but we're not looking at how much of continuous development do these people get. So that is why I'm saying that the holistic issue, when we say we're looking at political will and we're looking at financial invest, it's not as simple as that. For instance, we said everybody could teach because the regulation that enforces that teachers need to acquire pedagogical skills. You know, again, I overheard over that. A lot of people will tell you, yes, I'm in the medical field, and so because I've studied medicine and I'm practicing medicine, I can teach. Do you have the pedagogic skills? Do you know how to teach? Do you know how to ensure that learning takes place? I think that's where we are missing it. So we absorb everybody into the classroom, which is okay. But that is why the law also says, if you have any other discipline and you come in there, you could go and do the postgraduate diploma in education. You could go in there, you do all of that. So I think this political will we're talking about is saying, because we need to have everybody come on board, because there's a deficit in the people who are in the teaching profession at this time, there need to be ways of upgrading and improving them. But to add to this again, what tools have we given the teacher? You know, I kept saying that, because you have to create the conducive learning and teaching environment. So oftentimes we talk about the learning environment and we don't talk about the teaching environment. So if you put a teacher in a classroom and you do not give the teacher the skills, the tools the teacher needs to facilitate learning, you see, you leave the teacher with no choice but to resort to what you have. Most times it's memorization. But there's this thing again we are all silent about. And I'm happy that the accelerated basic education also touches on that. The language of communication to the child. By policy, every child should be taught in his mother tongue. By this age we are talking, conceptually. So we are looking at age 10, but what happens before then? They build up onto that one. So if this child, again, I know this from experience because I remember sometime in Kogi State, we developed the Igala curriculum, discussion with the NERDC. So the Igala Igbira curriculum came on the table. And you pass on this draft, and then you say, as I speak to you today, as important as Igala language is, spreading across several states, and despite the work we did in 2015, 2019, I think thereabouts, this curriculum is not there. So some of these barriers we are talking about has to do with addressing this mother tongue we talked about. Of Nigerians, over 200 and something languages, how many of them actually can a child learn in the language of the mother? So a bit of this barrier we are talking about has to do with not just the infrastructure, not just the learning environment of the child, but we also need to begin to look at milestones. What should I see? Because if we do this community awareness, if we begin to do this parent sensitization, and this campaign gets there, you see the multifaceted thing. It's
really multifaceted. Thank you very much.
And yet they are all connected.
And in 30 minutes, Dr. Hayab, with given all those challenges, is ending learning poverty feasible?
Yes, we can end learning poverty if we start with a huge investment in education. And that actually feeds into the question of our political will to ensure that education is our priority. Then other things follow. Until we do this, I do not see us ending this learning poverty. It might just be lip service, but we need to change our commitment.
Thank you very much, Dr. Philip Hayab, an educationist, all the way from Katsina there. Thank you so much for coming on the program. And of course, I had Honorable Rosemary Ojochenemi Oshikoya, former Commissioner for Education, Kogi State. It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
And thank you for being part of the program. I'm Ikaria Clinton. Goodbye.